Good evening, everyone. Allison Scoberg here. Tonight, we're here with ADDA, the Attention Deficit Disorder Association of Houston. It's been serving the greater Houston area since 1987. We are the Fort Bend County chapter. We have parents that join this meeting from all over the state. So if you're not in Fort Bend County, you're still in the right place. Tonight, we are excited to have Debbie Elder with us. Again, you may have had the pleasure of hearing her speak in the past. She is an educator, owner of a private school, private elementary school in Richmond, Texas. And she has had her own TED Talk, wrote a book. She has very, very talented, wonderful presenter. And I will say both personally and professionally, I have benefited from her talks in the past. So we're excited to have her back with us tonight. So from a housekeeping perspective, let me just give you a little heads up. Your cameras are muted and your audio, so we can't hear you or see you, but we do know you're there and we're glad you're here. So Debbie will be presenting tonight, and we do want to take your questions, and we do want to answer as many questions as we can throughout the presentation. Tonight we're going from 6:30 to 7:30, so if you're planning dinner or childcare or any of the other million tasks that you have going on tonight, just know that we will be done at 7:30. Tonight's webinar is being recorded, and tomorrow you guys will get an email with a copy of the slides as well as the recording. So you don't have to take notes of every single thing that she says, because you will definitely get the slides. So thanks so much for joining us. The ADDA organization is a nonprofit organization that serves the community for support for ADHD, ADD related diagnoses. This Fort Bend group is more of a group for parents that have kids with ADHD, but there are support groups all across the state, all across the Houston area that might be a particular, relevant group to you and kind of the journey that you're on if you yourself have ADD, ADHD, what have you. So just know that there is kind of a mothership. We're never a big pusher of joining the organization. You can join the organization for $40 a year. And they do have annual conferences that are very, very great. And they bring speakers in from all over the country, and they're awesome. So if you haven't checked out those conferences in the past, that may be a conference that you can benefit from in the future. And in our email that comes out, we'll have information in there how you can join if you want to join the group. So thanks again for being here, and don't be shy. Put your questions in the chat box if you have questions. Probably another parent has the same question, so you are helping the entire group. So having said that, Debbie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be back. And before we get started, I think it's very timely as we talk about effective parenting that I share with you. I recently, as in like 90 minutes ago, added another member to my family, my fourth grandchild. A little girl was born. Mom and daughter are healthy and happy, and I am so excited to meet them hopefully tomorrow. So we'll get started. Just a little bit about my background so you kind of know what you're listening to and where this information is coming from. I am Canadian, so when I say out and about, that is the correct way to say it. Just kidding. I've lived here for 28 years now, raised both my daughters here. My background is originally in criminology. I was a police officer in Ottawa, Ontario, my hometown. And then I moved to Calgary, where I worked at a young offender center. I learned a lot about effective leadership as I was leading and working with these young men who had gotten in trouble with the law. And I learned about enforceable statements, which I'll talk about. I learned about how to get people to do things with effective persuasion, which I'll also talk about. And it was just one of the best learning experiences I could have had in my early 20s. I am also a former therapeutic parent. And when you're a therapeutic foster parent, you work with students and children who have severe behavior problems. We worked with specifically teenager girls Having two daughters of my own, I wasn't comfortable having males in the home, but I was very comfortable working with teenagers. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you tonight, I learned during that experience. And it was almost like a training ground to raise up my daughters. So I had the opportunity to work with 38 individual foster daughters that really showed me a lot about parenting and how to help these young girls be their best selves. So I'll share that with you. I had an opportunity after doing that to move to Ireland, where I lived for a short period of time before arriving here in Houston. I've taught preschool. I've ran 15 middle and high schools for 12 years around the country and serviced about 1,500 homeschoolers a year. I was a college planner. Yes, I'm very old. And now I've had a elementary school for 8 years. I absolutely love it. I do a lot of speaking and training. I worked as a professional speaker, training teachers while I was homeschooling my daughters. And I just want to pass on some things that I've learned and hope that you'll engage with me. If you have comments or questions, it really makes these webinars much more engaging and a lot more interactive if you will participate with me. So let's play. Allison, do I have the opportunity? Oh, there we do. It worked. All right. So there's two basic principles that I've learned as I've done this. And it doesn't always feel like this in the moment, but every child I've worked with, and I've worked with thousands now, want to succeed and they want to please you as their parent. Our job is to make it easy for them. So what does that mean? That means we need to have clarity about what we're asking for. You need to be very clear on your vision, right? What do you want walking out your door at 18? And by that, I mean, when I decided to homeschool my daughters, I had to really think about way more than just academic curriculum. Now I was it for them. I had to think about, what am I trying to mold? What am I trying to create? What am I trying to equip them with so that they can be successful when they go out? And sort of what our mantra was, I want you to stub your toe with me so you don't break your leg when you're out in the real world. And so there was no hovering. There was no hoping they wouldn't get frustrated or have disappointment. I relished in those teachable moments so that we could use that to build resilience and perseverance and have the opportunity for them to really step into who they were. When I was a college planner, and this was fascinating to me, I would have never guessed this. I went from my little bubble of working with my students in my schools across the country to now working with students in public and private schools here in Houston. And the astounding thing that I noticed repeatedly with the students that I was hired to work with is a distinct lack of self-awareness. So if you get nothing else from tonight's talk, help your child to become more self-aware. How do you do that? You give them opportunities to journal. You point out things that you've noticed in their behaviors, in their decision-making. You allow them to realize, wow, you really are a morning person, or you seem to do better in small groups than larger organizations. Help them to label, claim, and name who they are, because that allows them to then step into who they want to be. I hope that makes sense. The next thing you want to do is your plan will help them achieve. What's your plan? How are you going to help them achieve the vision that you want? And that is something that we really thought about. I talked to my husband about it. I said, I never go to a meeting without my own agenda. And so when I talk to parents, and I did a lot of parent coaching back in Canada, and I did some here, most parents, not you guys on this webinar because you're here, but a lot of parents, you're gonna be surprised, parent every day like it's a new day, and will parent without any clarity about what they want. So they just kind of do their thing, and then when the child does something they don't want, they react. I would prefer for you to respond. So if you have a plan and you know what you're trying to affect, you can respond instead of react. Allison, we can go to the next slide. So we want to produce leaders and citizens who are able to take us into the next century, right? And they need to be leaders of themselves first. So what does that look like? That's being able to be self-managed, have self-regulation, to have self-understanding, self-awareness, self-confidence, all those self words, right? feelings of self-worth, because those really affect their ability to learn in the classroom, their ability to perform in the workplace. And so helping them to develop that is really important, because then they can be leaders of others. And by leaders of others, they need to be first a leader of themselves and to set that example. And I think that's really important for us as parents to recognize as one of our goals in this journey.
Debbie, can you talk about, you said a moment ago, you're kind of talking about kind of letting go and letting them, and kind of, you talked about, relishing in the teachable moments and maybe taking a step back, taking the helicopter parent hat off. But that's hard for a lot of parents. Do you have any advice on some first steps, or kind of moving in that direction, if that's a place that you've been as a parent?
Yeah, so at my school, we don't have a whole lot of rules. I really deal with principles, right? The way by which I want my students to respond, but we really work on raising critical thinkers. And if you as the parent are making all the decisions for your child, if you're so not wanting them to feel disappointment, frustration, any of those negative feelings, they don't get to experience how to avoid them themselves. And I think that was one thing that I really noticed when I was working with this large members in the community, is that they really struggled to have the skill set for that. And I think there's life lessons that we need to learn, Allison, and if we learn them young, they don't cost near as much. So let me give you an example. A neighbor of mine, I worked with her son. He was really struggling with his behavior, and she was, as a single mom, struggling with him. Their father had unfortunately died at a very young age, and he just was he was ADD, a little rambunctious, and she just was running out of ideas with him. And so we worked together, and then she called me in the fall and said, he got a bunch of money this summer for his birthday, and he wants to buy an Xbox. Well, Christmas is coming and his birthday's in February, and I don't think that's a good use of his money. And I said, okay, well, here's what I would suggest. You let him spend his money. I think he was 10. You let him spend his money on his Xbox, because I want him to learn the lesson that if he had waited, he might have got one for Christmas, he might have gotten one for his birthday. I said, but if you step in and you tell him, no, you may not use your money to buy that Xbox, now you're the bad guy. Because, your boss, I said to this woman, never told you, I've been noticing the way you dress. You have far too many shoes. No more shoes for you, right? We don't do that in the adult world, but we tend to do that with our children. And I said, I will guarantee you by the end of February, he will share with you that he regrets the decision to buy this Xbox. So February 25th, no call. February 26th, no call. February 27th, no call. Late February 28th, I got the call. So I just slid in under the wire, and she called and said, he just shared with me he wished he had saved his money, listened to me, and not done it. I said, fantastic. Now the teachable moment here is, this is so much better than you purchasing your first home, unable to afford it, or buying a car that you don't need yet. So it's really about looking at, where are the baby steps? Where can we allow them to, yes, hear our wisdom. Don't hear I'm not wanting to guide them, because I'm so not about that. And you'll hear more about that this evening. But it's about allowing them some abilities to make decisions and to learn from their experience how it's best to move forward. And I didn't want to take my parents' advice either, right? And so really our job as parents is to build that relationship, to be there as their support system. And I know with my students and my daughters, I always envisioned it as a big walking stick or a pole that I kind of planted in the ground of where I wanted them to get to. And I held firm to that. And I just waited for them to come to me at that place. I didn't waver. I believed in them when they didn't believe in themselves. And that's what we do as parents. We believe in our children until they believe in themselves, and we allow circumstances and situations to help them get closer to that marker. So
and you kind of commented on this, but how do you let your teenager become responsible without, being overbearing? Where's that balance? Can you talk to us on some tips for that?
Sure. So what I talked about with my older students, with my own daughters, teenagers, with the people I worked with at the Young Offender Center, here's the balance. You have freedom and responsibility. You don't want to take the responsibility, I take back the freedom. And it's not I take back. Here's what I told my foster daughters, and this was the best line, and you're welcome to borrow it and use it. I would welcome them into my home, and I'd say, listen, I work for an agency. I have to have 3 rules. I'm not really a rule person, but here's the rules. Rule number 1, no long distance phone calls. This was back in the 80s. And that was a big thing. Well, most of the girls I took in either came from the jail I worked at recently, or they came off the street. They weren't phoning anybody long distance. So it was kind of a non-rule. Second rule was, and I walked them upstairs, I said, these are my daughter's bedroom, this is my husband in my bedroom, and this is my office. There's nothing up here. So you can't go upstairs without permission. And the third rule was that they needed to keep their bedroom clean. They were like non-negotiable rules. But I said to them, hey, every Friday, I need to call your school and just check in and hear how you're doing. If you skip school, if you don't turn in your assignments, and if you don't do your homework, we'll just do school my way. Hey, I know you're 16, you've been in school now for like 12 years. I get it, but that's just what I have to do. And they're like, oh, okay. And I said, I'll know you need my help when one of those 3 things happens. Well, I knew, Allison, that they were not equipped to manage school. They had been bouncing around the street. They've been in different foster homes. They've been in different schools. You know, one school's doing algebra, the next school they moved to is doing geometry. Well, I can tell you as a teenager, you would rather be bad than stupid. So they would get kicked out of class. They did all these crazy things. This resonated with them because I gave them control, right? You have control of this. If you can get your schoolwork done, I'm out of your hair. I'm not going to bother you. I'm not going to ask you about homework. It's all on you. But the minute anything goes sideways, I'm going to help you. Not one of those 38 girls ever said to me, what's the help going to look like? Let me tell you what it's going to look like is what we did. So the minute one of those 3 things happened, now they did school on my terms. They came home after school. We did an hour of homework. If they had no homework, they reviewed their work and their class notes for the day. If they finished all of that, they were able to read. But it was a sit down side by side with me working on their studies. What we saw was a direct increase in likable, approvable behavior and their grades. All the misbehaving stopped. So if I had said to them, hey, this is how we do school here, blah, 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 one would have probably ran away, or 2 would have resisted us from the beginning. So giving them some freedom within boundaries, right, is really, really effective. But you have to set clear boundaries. And that requires, as parents, for you to think ahead. And that's a lot of what I want to talk about tonight is how do we do that? How do we anticipate the next level?
I know that we have, you know, a lot more slides to go through, but one question is what age do you allow them to make a decision? And then I guess you're probably going to talk about natural consequences and other things like, so when we're allowing them to make the decisions and the decisions are just plain bad. I mean, I at my house, I talk about the wheels on the bus, wheels off the bus, and wheels are off the bus a lot. and so I know with a lot of other parents, with, you know, various conditions with their kids that they're experiencing some similar things. And so how do we address that when the behavior is definitely not what we need it or want it to be?
Yes, and I know I'm a trainer in the Nurtured Heart approach, which some of your parents might have heard my talk on that before. I've spoken to this group on that before. The Nurtured Heart approach has 3 stands, which is like 3 stands of a stool or 3 legs on a stool, and you must have all 3. So you have to have a very clear yes, a very clear no, and clarity on what the consequences are. And there's no warnings, nothing changes. So what I've seen that kind of confuses kids is when there's not consistency, as we know is parenting 101, and when there is no follow through, right? When we say one thing and don't do what we say we're going to do. And so being very clear for me, I allow my students to have so much voice and choice until they abuse it, until they show me Again, going back to that until they need my help. And then I step in and I run the show for a while. But there's guideposts. And when we, it's very common for parents to take away, I'm taking away your gaming, I'm taking away your video time, I'm taking away your screen time. Not a big fan of that. But what you need to do, if that's something you choose, is you need to give them guideposts to earn back your respect and your trust. Otherwise, they get to what is the fourth level of misbehavior, which is feelings of inadequacy. It's like, why bother? I can't ever make her happy. I'm out. I'm done. So children only misbehave for 4 reasons, which is really good, right? So you can figure out what those 4 reasons are by the way it makes you feel. So they either need your attention, they need power, they want revenge, or they have feelings of inadequacy. And how you feel determines and helps you to figure out. So if they need attention, you feel like it's a mosquito around your head. They're just like kind of buzzing around you. If you get in front of that, if you give them attention, which I'm going to speak to this evening, for things they're doing right. So we look at behavior as a line, right? Above over here is all the acceptable behavior. Everything below that, unacceptable. As parents, if we're really honest, we tend to, as a group, speak only to our children when they cross that line and they go below what's expected, when they don't do what we want, when they don't do what we've talked about. And they get what? All of our attention, that big vein that pops out in our head, our red face, our shrill voice. I would like to encourage everyone on this call tonight to turn that upside down and start giving them appreciation, recognition when they're doing the right thing. If you continue to support what you want, you will get more of it. And I think that's a really different way to look at parenting. And there's a whole lot into how to do that. It sounds really simple. It's not easy, but it is very, very effective. And so we use that with our school, and I've been using it for 8 years now with hundreds of students. And we work with kids, ADD, ADHD, with autism, that kids that are like super advanced. We really try to represent the entire community, and it works across the board. It works with my staff. It works with my spouse. So being able to appreciate what you want requires you to know what that is, right? I talked earlier about not being reactive. So you've got to sort of set down a map. I knew what I wanted from my children. We ran a system called the CHIP system that was incredibly effective. I wrote down what a perfect day would look like. Then I wrote down a couple of things that I would not tolerate. Then I handed them a sheet of paper and said, okay, you write down all the things you want to cash your chips in for. And I'm talking poker chips is what I used. And so they wrote down everything they wanted. And then I took that list and I assigned a weight to that. So many chips per item. You want to go to Sonic for a drink, that's 10 chips. You want to go play catch at the park, that's 17 chips. You want to go to Laser Zone, that's 847 chips, right? You can really manipulate it the way it works best for you to ensure that there's a level of, this is going to cost me money and a lot of time, and this is not going to cost anything, and it's a really great time to connect with my child. That's a great way because it allows the child to tell you what motivates them instead of you trying to figure out what motivates them, right? I think that's a big problem with us. We try to do the work for our child instead of allowing them to do the work for us. And that's one of the ways you can do that is ask what motivates you. So that chip system allowed them to put chips into a jar. It's very simple for everything they did right on that list. You got up in the morning, you brushed your teeth, you made your bed, whatever is important to you, they got rewarded for that, literally rewarded. Then if they made some mistakes on those areas that you identified that you're working on, those 5 areas, chips came out. Once they had chips accumulated that they wanted to use, they could then purchase those events or opportunities with you. That was a very effective system. I used it with my daughters, and I also have used it in my schools. It's a great leader into intrinsic motivation, which is what we're trying to get to. When you use chips or anything like that in a token economy, that's external, right? It's something they have to move and touch. You really want them to get to the point where they're making these decisions because it's the best decision for them. So that's a whole lot of big stuff about your answer. We were not going to talk about any of that tonight, but that's worth it. It works. So When we look at, I'm going to go back to the slides, contributing members of our society, they're well-rounded. Well-rounded does not mean you've been through that McDonald's drive-through too many times. I'm talking well-rounded in that you have a appreciation, you have the ability to have joy, to be happy, you're empathetic, you have spent time doing things other than just academics, right? You have different things that you do outside of school that you're very happy about, that fill your soul, that help you to identify, I'm an artist, I'm an athlete, whatever it is that your child does really, really well, really help them to step into that level of self-awareness. We can move to the next slide. So children need to think, because a mind is like a parachute. It works a whole lot better when it's open. So if we keep making all the decisions for our children, if we keep micromanaging them, because I know myself, I learned at a very young age, I am a boss, I am not an employee. I do not like to be told what to do. I like to listen, I'm very open, but I have a personality that needs to be the boss. And I think if we don't allow our children to make decisions, they can't make decisions. When I was working again with these college-bound students, so many of them did not have decisive problem-solving, critical thinking skills. Pretty scary when you're sending them off to college, $600,000 to go do what they're going to do, and they can't answer some simple questions about themselves. So just something to keep in mind. Children need to think. So you need to give them opportunities, which I know you do, to allow them to have that opportunity. Part of our job is to instill a love of learning for their lifetime. Make it fun, significant, interesting, meaningful. I had the opportunity to go back to get the equivalent of my MBA through Goldman Sachs. And when I was approved for the program, it's a 3-month program, pretty intense. You work with a bunch of business people. You go through very similar to what they're doing at one of the the most prestigious entrepreneurial business schools in the country. They work with you to improve your business. So I let my students know that I was going back to school. And one of my first graders came to me and said, Mrs. Elder, I just can't wrap my head around like you going back to school, right? So it was really important for me that they knew that even at my old age, it's still important to keep learning new things. We want to ensure that we instill a love of learning in our children, especially now when they're in school. I watch so many kids go through the motions of education. They're just checking a box. I got this paper done. I got this test done. I can retake the test. I only got a 70. I mean, we need them to learn and be engaged learners. And that's a whole other topic, but something I want you to just be aware of. So you're making sure you're maintaining that, because that's their job. And if they don't feel successful in their job, which is going to school, you're going to see ramifications at home, and they're going to struggle in their life. And that's not what we want for our kiddos. So lead them, encourage their efforts, lead by example, and only accept quality work. And what I mean by that is when we set a standard, they will meet it. They will always meet that standard. So if you lower the standard, you really do them a disservice. So I want you to encourage them. Now, we know in learning, there's a fine line. If it's too easy, they're bored. If it's too hard, they're frustrated. And I know my teachers work very hard to ensure we maintain that line, because, it's not straight. It changes all the time. If a child's growing physically, that line will change on how they learn. So it's keeping up with them as a parent and having conversations, meaningful conversations. Don't accept how was your day at school? It was all right, right? I know at our school, we send out a email every Monday that says, hey, this is what we're going to be teaching this week. If you want to have conversations about it, if you want to enhance it, here's some specific questions that you can ask, because most children, when you ask them about an 8-hour day, it's like, it's too big. I can't even get into it. Teenagers don't want to tell you, but if you can be specific, hey, I understand in history now you're studying, Lamar and what he brought to Texas. Can you share a little bit of that with me? You've helped them to pinpoint a point in their brain that they can probably pull back up and talk to you about. So it's a great way to connect with them in a uncomfortable way, right? You don't want to be asking them about their boyfriends or girlfriends, but you can talk about school when they're older. All right.
A lot of our kids leave a trail behind them everywhere they go. a little trail of their stuff, a little trail of everything. So accept only quality work. Can you give us an example for families that have kids that leave trails? How do we go back to them? And you're responding, you're not reacting, you're staying calm. Can you give us like an example of that?
I'm going to give you an academic example, and then I'll give you a home example. So academically, I'm a big believer in critiques. So in most schools, if you get a 70, for example, or whatever you get on a test, anything below a 95, you look at your test and you're like, oh, okay. You put it in the trash and you move on because they got a schedule they got to keep. What I've always done is if you get below a 95, you must do a critique. And a critique sheet includes telling me why you got the answer wrong, what the correct answer is, and what you can do differently next time. And that's huge, right? There's your critical thinking. This stops so many academic trails, to use your word, Allison, because what they determine is, oh my gosh, my 2 looked like a 5. That's why I got it wrong. Or I used the wrong order of operation, or I rushed, or I didn't really understand. I should have asked my teacher. So it develops that reflective turn in and really think about what's going on with me. In the home, it's again getting really clear on expectations. So I know for me, I was real big on the when then. So when you've put your clothes away, then you can watch TV, have dinner, whatever it is. The goal though is to stick to what you say. I was at a conference years ago and I shared that. And a woman in the back of the room stood up and said, yeah, that doesn't work. I tried that. And I said, tell me about it. She goes, well, I told my son that until he cleaned his room, he couldn't come to dinner. And I said, did you feed him that night? She goes, oh, I did. So you've got to stick to your guns and don't say something you're not willing to come through on and follow through on, and that you truly believe. So when you say leave a trail, are you talking about disorganization? Or maybe you can give me a little bit more feedback there.
Oh yeah, I think it's maybe some of the disorganization. Like one example that I have of one of our kids was, it's always a clean up after yourself in the kitchen. Our dishwasher is always ready to have dirty dishes put in. It's always unloaded in the morning. So don't leave your dishes in the sink or on the counter or on the table or whatever. And so one of the ways that we combated this is when that would happen, we would wait until the morning because we get up early. I'm like you, Debbie. We get up with the chickens, right? So then when we saw the dishes, I would just quietly go upstairs and say, oh, I'm so sorry to wake you, but however, you left your dishes in the sink and I need you to come take care of those. And a few times coming down at 5:30 in the morning to take care of those responsibilities. I didn't yell, I wasn't mean or anything like that. But then it's like, well, next time at 11 p.m. when I'm getting a snack, I'll just go ahead and put this in the dishwasher because I know she'll come up in my room at 5:30 and ask me to put my dishes in the dishwasher. So that was like an example of not yelling or not being, not being crazy, but still getting what we had hoped for. And, and it was annoying to her.
It's an excellent example. And it really gets to the crux of what we're trying to talk about tonight is, when you get mad, and upset and crazy, you're like a game. You think of those video games. Why are they so addictive? Because that's what they do. There's bells and whistles and things are going all the time. But those video games are also non-emotional, right? So when you do really well, they advance you levels. And when you don't, they knock you down levels. There's no like, oh, but I was tired. I should be able to stay at this level. There's none of that goes on. You just get knocked down. Do the kids get frustrated and quit? No, they go right back at it because they know it's consistent and they know there's no emotion attached to the consequences. So that is a great analogy for all of you to keep in mind. I love that example. And I used the same things. I was very clear on what the consequences would be when something was not done the way we had expected. And we talked about it. Consequences are not always the same for every child. My daughters needed different consequences for different behaviors that didn't meet the standards or the expectations within our household. And so we treated them as individuals. And to have a blanket, which is why I'm not a big believer in those rules I mentioned earlier. I have several students that therefore need very different responses to things that might happen on our campus, and being willing to understand that fare is what you pay when you get onto a bus. It's not how we manage our kids. So
I just have one other question, because I know that there's comorbid conditions in the families that are on here. You know, there's this slippery slope of there's this individual with a disability, an intellectual disability, or they have other circumstances that, the frontal lobe issues that we know that we all have with this group, right? How do we find that balance to where we're being fair for really the stuff that they're on, or the place that they're at in their life, and helping them get where they want to be and need to be, but also so not being a helicopter in light of a disability, but also having grace and understanding that our kids do have disabilities. So how do you bridge that?
No, that's an excellent question. And I know at my school, I have 5th grade students doing 9th grade math, and I have 5th grade students doing 3rd grade math. So we all come very individual with very, very big differences. I also believe strongly, and I've proven it over and over and over again, that all children are so incredibly capable. And we just need to believe in what they have, and to have that connection, so that when we're expecting too much, when we're pushing them farther or faster than they're ready to go, they're able to come back and articulate that to you. And giving them the words and having those conversations really allows them to start to manage, right? Because my goal is to allow my daughters, which I think we did really well, to leave and launch and just be super successful at what they wanted to do. And so going back to what I asked in the beginning is, what do you want walking out your door at 18? What are those skill sets that they need to be equipped with, as well as mental attitude and emotional stability, that is going to allow them to be strong, contributing members of society where they're happy and appreciative and have joy. And so when you're really in tune to what your child needs, then you can help give them what they need and to watch progress. We had a student this year on the autism spectrum who really struggled in relationships. And we honored that struggle, but did not allow him to regress. We moved him forward to the point now where I'm incredibly proud of myself and my staff. He is actively playing with other students. He is enjoying their presence. He is telling them jokes. Back in the fall, that was not the case at all. But we believed in his ability. He's bright, he's smart, and he was very interested in that. He just didn't know how to do it, right? So looking at sometimes emotional things as they just need to be taught as much as the ABCs and the math. And we often forget that some of these softer skills that we think our kids are just going to develop them through osmosis. Doesn't work that way. It has to be taught just the same way as reading, writing, and arithmetic. And that has always served myself and my community when we look at it in that perspective, so that we can truly, I lesson plan as much about social emotional intelligence as I do about academics, because I value it equally. And I think in order to be successful, our students need to have those things. Our children need to have the ability to connect, to communicate, to critically think, to be creative, to problem solve. All of these are really, really important, and they need to sort of be the pillars that we use to guide them through their experience with us before they're ready to head out into the world and show up the way they are. So some ways to improve feelings of self-worth. Self-esteem comes from what you do. It doesn't come from what people say about you. And so keeping a victory journal is super exciting and very, very, very effective with kids and with adults. Anybody can do this, or you can keep a successful on your computer. But when you get that as an adult, when you get that email from your boss that tells you what a great job you did with the last client, or as a child, when you hit the grand slam at the baseball game and you write that in your own handwriting, because we know as they get older, mom and dads praise or recognitions don't really land the same way. It's like, well, you're my mom, you're supposed to say that. But when you read your own handwriting, you're like, dang, I am pretty awesome. This is pretty good, right? So that really helps with that. Identifying strengths builds their self-confidence and instills a sense of self-discipline. Because when you see yourself as awesome, you start to think about self-regulation a lot differently. One thing we've noticed with this nurtured heart approach is a huge increase in our students' ability to self-regulate, because they truly want to be a part of the group. And when you're a part of the group, you're doing the right thing. When you don't receive energy from the teacher, it's because you've chosen in that moment, and only in that moment, to not do the right thing. But we give them, as I mentioned earlier, those guideposts. There's ways to enter back. And oftentimes for us, it's simply, are you ready to rejoin? Let's try this. And they get a brand new slate. Let's start this again. We don't measure our students by their behavior or our children, right? We love them for who they are, and we help them to manage better the behaviors that they exhibit. So we can go to the next slide. So things not to do. As you can see on her face, she does not like to be micromanaged, criticized, or have inconsistency with her parents, because it's confusing to a child when they come home after school and they see you after work and you've had a horrific day and you have a really bad headache, and you snap at them for a question they asked, like maybe something, a cookie before dinner. And then the next day you come home and your boss is out of town, you've had a great night's sleep and you feel like $1 million, and you have the fight in you to hold the line, right? So there's the difference. And none of us expect to be perfect. I'm certainly not a perfect parent, nowhere near it. But I think being aware of sort of where those traps are really can help. So making sure that we take care of ourselves and really practice self-care goes a long way to allowing us to be the parent that we dream about at night, that allows us to step in and do the best for our children.
So Debbie, talk to us again on like not micromanaging and like some of the natural consequences. Like, for instance, we have teenagers that need to be woken up in the morning and they can't get up to their alarm or what have you. Is the natural, so micromanaging is waking them up. Of course, they're in high school, they should wake up themselves. So in that example, do you suggest letting them sleep through their alarm, letting them be late a few times to school, have tardies, make up assignments in that example? Or do you keep waking them up day after day and they sleep through their, what would you do? What would Debbie do?
Let's get bracelets made. No, so let me give you an example that's similar to that. So when I had my first 5 years of running my middle and high schools, I had one in my home. My daughters were homeschooled and they're like, Mom, we signed up for homeschooling. We're not going to a school. And I said, all right, then I'll just bring the kids in. So we did that. And we attended a speech class every 2 weeks. And the understanding was you needed to have finished lunch, packed up your stuff, cleaned up your area, loaded everything in the van that we needed for speech class, and be in the vehicle by 11:30. And at 11:30, I'm in reverse and I'm leaving. And if you're not in the vehicle, you're not coming. Now, I was by myself with these kids, but I'm smarter than the average 12 to 16-year-old on a good day. I had a neighbor whose daughter attended my school. And I said to her, if I'm leaving on a Friday morning on a speech day and I honk the horn twice, there's somebody in my house that didn't make it in the van. So the first couple of weeks, everybody did great. But about the 4th or 5th week, she heard the honk. She came and got 2 boys and took them to her house, and they worked on their stuff. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, that happened to be the same day that we went for ice cream after speech class. We had never done that before. It was crazy. So we went and had ice cream. We had so much fun. The kids got to play. And then we came back, and those boys had just worked all afternoon. They had missed it. So there was a natural, logical consequence to their choice of not being in my van on time. I stuck to it. 11:30, I pulled out, knowing that they were not in the car. And I think allowing them to, I mean, if we continue to protect them, I know as a business owner, if you don't come to work, I dock your pay. So if you don't go to school, there has to be consequences. So not getting up for your alarm, not setting an alarm is immature behavior. So we talk about freedom and responsibility. You have released your ability to have freedom. The other thing that I've done and suggested to parents with children who can't get up in the morning is, oh, honey, that's okay. Obviously, you need more sleep. So we're just going to send you to bed a half an hour earlier. We'll start at half-hour increments and see how that works. And then you pull all electronics out of the room, obviously. So all they can do in the room is read or sleep. And so both of those techniques work very well. But yeah, allowing a child to really feel it when the cost is low. We go back to what we talked about earlier. Anytime you wait on these things, life lessons just get more expensive. So tardiness doesn't serve anybody very well in any part of their life. So helping them to overcome that habit before it becomes a habit, I think is time well spent by a parent.
One more question on that, but when do you swoon in? Like in that example, let's say we have a student and they've been consistently tardy, they've missed finals, whatever, they're about to fail a grade, they're about to be kicked out of a college or a university, there are big dollars are at stake or things like that. Do you just let it happen? Because that's the big thing that has to happen for them to figure things out. Is there a line there?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what's your plan? What's your vision? What are you trying to get to? And if you're at getting ready to get kicked out of college, there has been a whole lot of opportunities that have been missed, right? So let's peel it back and look at small misbehaviors turn into larger misbehaviors. So it's nipping it in the bud, making sure we're recognizing it, what it could grow to be. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And I look at what do I want walking out my door at 18, I knew this behavior was getting me there. Oh, this one was not. This decision was getting me there. This one was not. It became very, very easy once I had that line clearly stated. So in saying that, I think, oftentimes we have high school students who are heading off to college, who probably should not be going to college yet. Oftentimes they're not prepared academically or with the proper skill sets that they need to be successful. So to be really aware of that and proactive with that, talk to someone like myself or another college planner or a coach to find out, can you do a quick assessment on my child? Do you feel they're ready and have the skill sets that they need? Do they demonstrate maturity, organization, strong desire? Oftentimes at 18, they don't know what they want to study. So why are they going yet? Maybe junior college is a better opportunity and a better growth path. So be looking at what's best for your child, not what everybody else is doing, because I think we often get caught into that. As a college planner, as an educator, I do not believe everyone should go to college. I think there's lots of great opportunities for children and adults and students to learn trades, to really step up and do what their strength set is. One of my former students struggled in school so much and is now an underwater welder, probably making more money than most of us on this webinar. And he's in his 30s. So he really stepped into his skill set and his parents supported him in that. And I think it was a really wise move for him. So I know I sound like a broken record, but really it all goes back to self-awareness of the child and allowing them to figure out what that is so that when things aren't going well, they can identify it, they can reach out for help, and they can tell you. So being that person for them that they feel comfortable with. When my daughters were in college, we got calls the first month saying, Mom, these other students don't know how to do stuff that like laundry and set up their Word documents. It was just, they were shocked at sort of the lack of ability of some of the other students. So it's real, it's out there. Kids are struggling with some of those basic skills. So take some time to figure out what those are. And if you don't know, reach out to me. I will help you. I know what they are. And once you have that laundry list, if you will, then you can start ticking them off as you're helping them get ready. And I think knowing that you are there preparing them makes a big difference. If they make different choices after they're prepared, you've done your job. And I think really that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, is have you effectively prepared them for the next phase of life? And I think that's what this sort of webinar is all about. Holding them accountable is really important, because if you don't, there's no reason to continue on the path, right? So one of the things, I go into a lot of school districts and work on culture. And one of the things I hear from the teachers all the time is they make us turn in these lesson plans, but nobody reads them. Well, if you're going to be told to do something, but nobody's holding you accountable for it, why would you do it? And so I think making sure there's a clear understanding. When you don't get out of bed in the morning for school, this is what's going to happen. I'm leaving to take your brother to school at 8:30. If you're not in the vehicle, you're going to have to arrange your own transportation, because I'm going to drop him off and then I have to go to work. I need you in school. You need to figure that out. So being able to set very clear boundaries of what you will accept and what you won't accept is really important. But stick to the gun. So you, as I say here, expect the best. So freedom comes with responsibility, but we still want to be their safety net. I think, Allison, that's kind of where you're going to, is where is that line? And I think it changes with every child and it changes with every age. But I don't ever want anything bad to happen to my kids, but I wanted them to feel I feel like I have a safety net at my house, right? When my children were young and my students were here, and they can fall off the ledge and land in my safety net, and I can brush them off and get them back up and send them out again, so that when they get out into the real world, they have already experienced that disappointment and frustration and, well, that didn't work out very well, right? My love for them never changes, but being able to adjust their freedom responsibility scale with them and for them allows me to be their safety net, so that they know I love you, but we're going to have to dial this back right now. I just caught you smoking cigarettes in your bedroom, so that means I'm taking the door off, or whatever it is that you decide you're going to do to maintain a level of what's important in your family. And different things are important in different families. I know for me, when I was raising my daughters, I taught them how to make their bed. But what was more important to me is that the areas of my home where my friends came in were not cluttered with their stuff. So your bedroom could be in whatever state you want it to. When the maid comes in weekly, you better get the stuff picked up so she can clean. But if you don't want to make your bed every day, I'm cool with that. Shut your door. But don't leave your stuff where my friends are going to see it. That's kind of what my lane was. When they went off to college, did they make their bed every day? They did. Very interesting. So it all kind of works out. But when I had to figure out, what am I going to put my parenting energy into? That wasn't it. So have clarity, access the skills they need, and be realistic, which speaks very much, Allison, to what you were speaking about. And they will give you cues and they will give you hints and they will allow you to see. I know with us, being able to determine with some of our students, is it incompetence or unwillingness? And being able to figure out what that is. If it's unwillingness, then you got to get to the crux of why it is. And that's why I go back to that connection with your child is very, very important. And I know when I worked at the jail, I had a reputation of being very fair and having a lot of respect for the young offenders that I worked with. So much so that when I left to have my first child, the disciplinary unit that I ran made me a quilt. Yeah, that's right. Guys that would have been, had they been adults, jailed for probably their lifetime because of the horrendous crimes they did, made me a quilt for my baby, because they knew they might not like what I had to say, but they knew they were treated fairly, with respect, and that I supported them. And that was done with consistency. And so your children very much will respect that if there's a feeling that they can connect with you, communicate with you, collaborate with you, and feel like they have a voice. That's a really important thing. One of the things that we did that was very effective was have regular family meetings. We had them weekly, where my children had an opportunity to participate in decisions that we made in the home. Now, they weren't participating in some decisions because those were my husband's and mine decisions, but any decision that we could share with them, we did. When we sat at that table and had that family meeting, everybody had an equal vote. So just be careful what you bring to the meeting, but everybody had a role. And when you participate and run a collaborative household, you change in the way you think, because it's not your parents' house. So that teenage party that's going crazy wild because they know the parents are out of town wasn't going to happen at my house, because my daughters weren't going to allow strangers to come into their house and wreck their house. They didn't think of it as mine and my husband's house. They very much believed that it was their house, because they had a say. They had a say in everything from paint colors we chose to where we went on vacation. And again, we were very open with those things. So just recognize what your levels of openness are and use it. Recognize achievement, like
Tonight,
we talked.
Everybody's going to get your guide to running an effective family meeting. I think
Yes.
I saw. So when we send the recording out and the slides, we're also going to send Debbie's guide to running an effective family meeting, which I've looked at before. So thank you
It's
for
really
sharing
helpful.
that with us tonight.
Of course. So of course you praise in public, correct in private. Be careful with praise. You really want to use recognitions. And by recognitions, I mean you're stating irrefutable evidence. And as we speak about students and children who are getting older, teenagers, you tell them they did a great job, or you tell them they look good, they're like, eh. But if you say to them or anyone else, hey, today I noticed that you came home from school, you made a snack, you put all the dishes in the dishwasher, you got right to your homework, you didn't play music like I asked you to do, and you were so pleasant at dinner. You talked with, I just want to acknowledge you for that. And what that tells me about you is that you really listen to what I ask, and you're willing to make changes to make this family the best family we can be. That's a whole lot better than great job today. So the more specific, and it's not our mother tongue, and I realize that, but it is so effective. When a compliment, a recognition, an acknowledgement lands, they feel it, and it's irrefutable. So by irrefutable evidence, I mean just that. They can't refute it. Even if they're in that nasty teenage mindset, they know somewhere deep down and a lot more closer to the surface than you realize that you're right. You are appreciating something about them that is true, and it's not just become you're my parent. It's because that's what just happened, or that's what I just did. And yes, I am awesome, right? And that's what we want for them. You want to really, our job is to work ourselves out of a job. So expect mastery, use your teachable moments, provide ongoing skill training. I think that's the big one for me is, every CEO in the country has a business coach. Why aren't we giving our kids coaches? I've been an academic coach for years. I've worked with hundreds of students where I teach them success strategies, not content, but how to learn content, how to acknowledge in a classroom where you should sit so you can get the best out of that class, how to study for different types of tests, so just like we would get our child a soccer coach or a golf coach or a basketball coach or a pitching coach, I really encourage you to look at what are some of the skills that are going to allow them to be their best selves that maybe they're lacking right now. Maybe it's soft skills. Maybe it's how to interview. I work with a lot of college-bound kids on how to go through their job interviews, their college entrance interviews, how to write a resume, all of those skills that are really, really important, but nobody teaches, right? Every school in America says, go home and study, but nobody tells you how to study. It's a big setup for our kids, and it's not really fair. So when we look at kids with ADD, ADHD, and we're talking about leaving a trail earlier, Allison, scheduling routine is really, really important and so helpful. I know with younger kids, I've used pictures on almost like a clothesline that you would hang up maybe in your kitchen, and it would just say, here's what's going to happen next. We're going to get up, we're going to eat breakfast, we're going to brush our teeth, then we're going to go to school, and then and you pull them off the clothesline as the event happens. So it stops all that. When do we get to go to the party? It's all laid out, right? With older kids, you invite them to enter into the planning process with you, whether it's through a family meeting or just conversation. Respect their biological clocks. Often, we expect others to be like us, and oftentimes our own children, and sometimes they just aren't. I'm a morning person, like Allison mentioned, but not everybody I work with wants to get up at 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning and go work out and do all these crazy things. So I have to respect their biological clocks. And so I encourage you to help your children recognize what is theirs, what is their time when they are really, really on, when they're in their strength path, when they're able to produce effortlessly. That's when they want to put their efforts into working on, it might be homework. I had friends growing up in high school who did their homework way into the evening. Oh, not me. I went to bed, woke up early and did my homework in the morning because that's when I'm my best. So being able to identify that is important. There's a difference between wants and needs, and this is the first sort of step in your self-discovery. So I want the Lamborghini I think that's a Lamborghini, but I just really need a vehicle to get to work, right? So wants and needs are really important, and we often confuse them, and children regularly do. So being able to identify that allows you to decrease your level of sometimes being disappointed or confused or frustrated. And so getting clarity there is really super important. So you want to be there as their coach, their cheerleader, as their parent. You're not their friend. They have lots and lots of friends. You're friendly, but you're not their friend, right? Your job is to be able to enhance their experience when they're with you, share your wisdom, and invite them in the way that they as an individual need to be invited to step into their best self. I watched a short video today with Brene Brown, shared it with my 3rd through 5th grade students, and she talked about you have a light, just like this fire, but we each carry a light. And if people you're with are light blower outers, you need to be careful who you surround yourself with. And our children need to have that lesson really, really early. And so being able to understand that that light represents you. And if people blow out your light because either your light is too big or it's too bright, then they're dismissing you. And we talked about how people and why people blow out others' lights. And maybe it's because you're intimidating. Maybe it's because you have low self-esteem. But we don't need to teach the people that blow our lights out to stop. We need to take that information in and adjust our path, right? We just sometimes certain people are not the best fit. And I wanted to give my 3rd through 5th grade students permission today that you don't have to be friends with everyone. You need to be cordial. You need to be polite. You need to have integrity, but you also need to protect your light. And I think that's something I want your children to also recognize. And to, once you identify your strengths, I like to concentrate on my strengths and compensate for my weaknesses. And I'm very clear, I have many, many weaknesses. So I surround myself with way smarter people than me so that they can rise me up and allow me to be the best I can be, so I can stay in my lane and do what I do really well. And I think that's something great to share with your children. Hey, Allison.
Debbie, you have been a source of light to all of us tonight and such an encouragement. And on the journey, it is a journey, and sometimes it's bumpy and sometimes it's smooth. Sometimes we think we've got it all figured out, and then we hit a bump in the road again. But you have given such awesome tools tonight that we can implement with our families, with our kids, with our households, the family meetings. How I want to get to your contact information because we're out of time for tonight. Do you have services or parents? Can they reach out to you? Tell us what you do other than speaking to our group tonight, and if parents want to connect with you.
Yeah, so I do a lot of success training. As I mentioned, I'm an academic coach, so I work with clients to help them learn strategies so that they can be the best student in the classroom. I also work with business people and entrepreneurs who are looking to grow their business. I love to work. They seem very different, but they're actually very, very similar. I have a lot of college-bound clients that I work with, just getting them ready. So if there's anything that I can help you with, whether it's deciding which school is best for your child or determining maybe a plan that will help your son or daughter be the best that they can be, and identifying areas that we can maybe make behavior changes in. I've been a parent coach since I lived in Canada, so I've been doing that for way too long, probably 30 years. So if there's any of those areas that are helpful or that you feel might be of service, because you've been on this call, because you're part of Allison's group, I do a 30-minute complimentary. We can either meet over Zoom or we can meet in person. I'm right in the Richmond area, and we can discuss ways that may or may not benefit you. And if it's a good fit, then we can move forward from there. But I do welcome and love to do coaching. And if you have a 1st through 5th grade student and you're close in the area of Richmond, Texas, we are taking enrollment now for all grade levels. We're getting pretty full, but we still have a few spots left. So if you'd like to learn more about what we do at school, I'd love to share that with you. We have a very entrepreneurial based school. In fact, if you live in the area, this Sunday from 12 to 4, we have our bazaar where my students have produced products that they're selling, and they just love it, and it's super cool. And they learn all about financial literacy, and they will produce for me a profit and loss and a balance sheet before they get their money. It's like, we're out of time, but it's super cool. So come see us. It's at Blockhouse.
Yeah, go to her school. Her school is cool. I have definitely been there and have enjoyed my time there. And it's a totally different vibe. So Debbie, once again, thank you so much for being here with us tonight and sharing your wisdom and insight and parenting tips. This is very, very great. And I'd like to thank everyone for taking an hour out of your evening tonight and spending that with us as well. And like I said, we will get an email out with the slides and the recording. And then Debbie, if you can just email us your parent meeting guideline, we'll attach that to the email that we put out to the registrant.
I will do that. So nice to meet everyone, and thanks for being on tonight. And I look forward to connecting with anyone that's interested.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.